Chapter 6. Darcy paced the length and breadth of the library at Matlock House. It had taken him some time to find his cousin. He had not been where he was normally wont to be, at this hour of the evening, but Darcy had finally run him aground. Richard Fitzwilliam was not the sort of gentleman to be lounging about home when there were more interesting entertainments to be found in town. Yet, to Darcy's surprise, home was precisely where Richard was. "Darcy," Richard greeted as he stepped into the library and secured the door behind him. "What brings you to visit and has you looking so—" He tipped his head and looked his cousin up and down. Unsettled. "She is here." Richard looked around the room. "Who is here?" he asked. "Miss Elizabeth," Darcy replied, dropping into a chair near the hearth. "She and her sister are visiting their aunt." He scrubbed his face with his hands. "Georgiana told them about Ramsgate." "Georgiana did what?" "I was not pleased to hear it either," Darcy assured him. However, she insisted that she could not allow others to be fooled, as she was, if she had it in her power to prevent it. He was still surprised that she had shared the story, almost as much as he was by her reason for sharing it. Richard joined Darcy near the fire. "I suppose that is at least an admirable reason for doing so." Darcy nodded his agreement. "I do not think we need to fear that Mrs. Gardiner, Miss Bennet, or Miss Elizabeth will spread the tale." As she was leaving Darcy House earlier that day, Mrs. Gardiner had made a point of whispering a promise to protect the information Georgiana had shared. "Mrs. Gardiner assures me that we all make mistakes when attempting to lead a child into adulthood." He shared a rueful smile with Richard. "Does she have children that are grown?" "No," Darcy answered. "I believe the eldest is 6. She has been instrumental, however, in Miss Bennet and Miss Elizabeth's lives. As I understand it, they have often visited with their aunt, and she is a sort of confidant for them." "And you said the eldest Bennet ladies are well-mannered?" Richard asked. "Yes," Darcy answered. "Then perhaps she knows of what she speaks." Darcy shrugged. "Perhaps." "And is that what has you in a stew?" "Only partly," Darcy admitted. "I love her." "I beg your pardon?" "I love Elizabeth," Darcy clarified, "and I wish to marry her." Richard laughed. "Last night you wished to avoid any mention of her name." Darcy rubbed his neck. "I know, but when she called at Darcy House, and her aunt said she had refused an offer of marriage, Richard, I thought my heart would stop beating, and, though I have tried, for the past several hours, to rid myself of the feeling of needing her, I cannot. I simply cannot imagine her with anyone else, nor can I imagine my life as even remotely happy without her in it." "I see," Richard said. "Am I being a fool?" Richard shook his head. "No." Darcy looked at him, hoping that his cousin would elaborate on his reply. "What can I tell you that you do not already know?" "Her family is ridiculous," Darcy said. "And so is Aunt Catherine," Richard countered. "Her father's estate is mismanaged." "That is not Miss Elizabeth's doing," Richard replied with a smile. "Her father has an estate. That is the relevant point. She is a gentleman's daughter, but she has little to bring with her to a marriage." "Besides herself," Richard challenged, "is Pemberley in need of funds?" "No," Darcy answered, "but she will likely bring her younger sisters with her, all 3 of them, hoping to be thrown into the paths of wealthy gentlemen. Silly younger sisters." Darcy shook his head at the thought. Richard grimaced. "That could be a problem, but is it great enough to require that you give up Miss Elizabeth to another?" Darcy scrubbed his face again. "No, I have argued all these points, over and over, and the answer is always the same." Richard cocked a brow. "A fool does not put so much thought into a decision, does he?" Darcy shook his head. "I suppose not." "Then marry her, and claim some happiness for yourself." "Darcy, I had heard that you were here," Lord Matlock said as he entered the library through the door that led to his study. "To what do we owe the pleasure of your visit?" He tipped his head and surveyed Darcy from head to toe just as Richard had done. "He's getting married," Richard replied. "I am considering getting married," Darcy corrected. "But I must convince her that I am worthy of her first." Lord Matlock leaned against the mantel and looked at his nephew with raised brows. "Have you shown her your bank accounts?" Darcy chuckled. "She knows I am not poor, but it seems character, rather than wealth, is of greatest importance." "Then she shall love you." Darcy shook his head. "I am afraid I made a very poor first impression." "Ah," Lord Matlock muttered as he nodded his understanding. "Put your foot in it, did you?" "Indeed I did," Darcy assured him. "She has an uncle in trade, and another who is a country solicitor. He might as well get the disagreeable portion of this interview over with straight away." "And her father?" his uncle asked. "He has a modest estate in Hertfordshire," Darcy answered. "Ah, I see," Lord Matlock said. "She's not of great standing, and you are worried that I will not approve." "Something like that, yes." Lord Matlock tipped his head from one side to the other and back. "I will not say that everyone will approve, but as far as I am concerned, I trust your judgment. He has thought through every ramification. Has he not, son?" "He has dissected it thoroughly," Richard assured his father. "He has even attempted to change his mind by fleeing her presence." Lord Matlock chuckled. "That rarely works." "So it would seem," Darcy agreed. "Do you love her, then?" Darcy nodded. "I do." "I am glad." "You truly approve?" Darcy asked in surprise. He had thought that there might be some argument about Elizabeth's being of no standing. "Very much so," his uncle replied. "I have always wished for you to find someone to love, and to love you in return. You need a woman, not a fortune, to wrap your arms around. Now, since I should like to meet this young lady, I will wish you well on your quest to improve her opinion of you, and when you have succeeded, send word. I will deal with Lady Catherine for you." "You were out late last night," Georgiana said, as she took a place at the breakfast table next to her brother the following day. "I was," he replied, filling his cup once again with tea. After receiving his uncle's approval to marry where he thought best, Darcy had spent another 2 hours with his uncle and cousin talking and playing cards. Lord Matlock had waxed eloquent a time or two on felicity and marriage, and seeing that an estate had an heir. He seemed most anxious to have a grand-niece or nephew whom he could bounce on his knee and tell tales. He had mentioned that more than once as well. The conversation had not all been about marriage, or the best way to grovel one's way into the good graces of an offended lady. They had also discussed more mundane topics, including the new upholstery Lady Matlock planned to order for their travelling coach once the weather turned warm enough to gad about town in the barouche. "You were not dressed for a soirée when you left." Darcy chuckled at his sister's attempt to not ask where he had been while still expressing her wish to know the answer to that very question. "No, I was not." His plate was empty, so he rested against the back of the chair and cradled his teacup. Her brows furrowed as she applied herself to cutting her toast into points, before topping each with a different jam. Raspberry on one, strawberry on the second, apricot on the third, and what Darcy knew to be her favourite black currant on the fourth. With that task completed, she filled her teacup and added just a splash of cream. "I was at Matlock House," Darcy finally said, upon hearing her small frustrated huff as she stirred her tea. "Richard was at home, as strange as that may be." "Indeed? Is he well?" Georgiana asked with a laugh. "He appeared to be, yes." "Did you have a good time then?" "We did. Uncle Henry insisted on playing casino." Cards of any sort were a favourite pastime for Lord Matlock. However, he was not one to frequent gaming tables for any length of time at soirees, or his club, since he desired for most of his money to stay in his accounts. A small wager was acceptable to lose. But one must always know his limits. Darcy had heard these words from his uncle many times over the years. "And did he win?" Georgiana asked. Darcy shook his head. "Once or twice. He was far more interested in talking than attending to his cards." Lord Matlock was not known for being subdued. Richard often said that his father could strike up a conversation with a horse and convince the animal to vote with him on the next bill that entered the house. It was a skill that Richard had inherited, and one that Darcy at times wished he possessed. "Were there any stories of particular interest that might be suitable to relate to me?" she asked, as she began eating her toast. Strawberry first, as was her usual fashion. Darcy chuckled. "No." Georgiana's brows rose. "Indeed?" she said with no small amount of curiosity. "Indeed," Darcy assured her. There was no way he was going to share with his sister about the duties of a husband to his wife. Nor was he ready at this moment to admit to her that he was indeed looking for a wife, a very particular wife, Elizabeth. Georgiana sighed and returned to her toast. "Are you going out today?" she asked. "I have not decided. I might call at Mrs. Verity's. I'm not expected there until next week, but I do enjoy reading to the children." He was considering calling on Elizabeth as well, and possibly inviting her to go for a drive or perhaps an evening at the theatre or on a trip to the museum. They were all things that he suspected she would enjoy. "Mrs. Annesley and I are planning to finish a few projects," his sister said. He could tell by the way she was smiling that those projects included a gift for him. "Will you be working on them the whole day?" he asked. "No," she replied, before washing down her third toast point with her tea. "Mr. Martin comes for a dance lesson this afternoon, and I have not yet mastered that Bach concerto." Darcy placed his empty cup on the table and, leaning back, watched her as she finished her breakfast. She had not looked so happy as she did this morning in a very long time. "What?" she asked when she noticed his observation. "Do I have jam on my chin?" she whispered. "No," he replied with a chuckle. "You have a smile on your face and an energy about you that has been absent for some time. I assure you, Fitzwilliam, my heart is healing." "So you have said, and I am beginning to believe it." She smiled at him. "I will be finished soon. Will you wait for me and escort me to my sitting room before you lock yourself away with your books and what not?" "I would like that," he replied. Georgiana popped the last bit of black-currant-covered toast into her mouth and took up her cup. Leaning back in her chair to enjoy the last of her tea, she watched her brother for a full 2 minutes before he began to squirm under her scrutiny. "Do I have jam on my cravat?" he whispered. She shook her head and then swallowed the last warm drops of tea before returning her cup to its saucer and standing in preparation to leave. "No, just a smile on your face and a relaxed air about you that I feared was lost." "It would seem," he said as Georgiana wrapped her arm around the arm he offered her, "that my heart has found its hope." She hugged his arm tightly and rested her smiling face against his shoulder. "I am glad," she whispered, "so very glad."